The coffee shop Emma had chosen was a small, cozy place near the British Museum, with warm lighting and the kind of atmosphere that encouraged long conversations. She arrived 15 minutes early, not from eagerness, though she was definitely eager, but because she had been too nervous to stay at home any longer. James arrived exactly on time, as she somehow knew he would. Out of uniform, he looked younger and more relaxed, wearing dark jeans and a blue sweater that brought out his eyes. Emma realized she had never seen him without his bearskin hat, and his dark hair was slightly wavy in a way that made him look less like a formal guard and more like any attractive man you might meet at a bookstore or museum. "I wasn't sure you'd actually come," Emma admitted as he sat down across from her. "This morning feels a bit like a dream." James smiled, accepting the coffee she had ordered for him. "I've been thinking the same thing. For the past year, you've been this mysterious, friendly face who brightened my mornings. Now you're sitting across from me, and I'm discovering you're even more lovely than I imagined." Emma felt herself blush. "Tell me about yourself, James. Beyond the guard uniform, I mean. What made you join the Queen's Guard?" Over the next 2 hours, they shared their stories. James told her about growing up in Yorkshire, his decision to serve his country, and his love for history and tradition. Emma shared her journey from a small museum in Manchester to her dream job in London, her passion for medieval manuscripts, and her initial loneliness in the big city that had led to her making friendly gestures to strangers. "So that's why you started waving," James said, understanding dawning in his expression. "You were trying to connect with people in a city that felt overwhelming." "Exactly," Emma nodded. "But somewhere along the way, it became less about fighting loneliness and more about seeing you. I started taking that route, even on days when it wasn't the most convenient way to get to work." James reached across the table and gently touched her hand. "I have a confession to make. I started requesting morning shifts specifically because I knew you'd be there. My fellow guards thought I had developed a sudden love for early mornings." Their conversation flowed effortlessly, moving from their pasts to their hopes for the future. Emma learned that James was passionate about military history and hoped someday to work in preservation of historical sites. James discovered that Emma's expertise in medieval manuscripts had led to her working on some of the most important historical documents in British collections. "You know," James said as they ordered their third round of coffee, "we actually have more in common than just our morning routine. We're both guardians of British history in our own ways." As the evening progressed, they found themselves talking about everything and nothing: favorite books, childhood memories, travel dreams, and the small daily things that brought them joy. The nervous energy of their first meeting had settled into something warm and comfortable, as if they had been friends for years rather than strangers who had shared only silent waves. "I have to ask," Emma said during a brief pause in conversation, "what happens now? You're transferring to Windsor, and I work in London. That's not exactly a short commute for casual coffee dates." James had been thinking about the same thing all evening. "Windsor is about an hour by train from London. I know it's not ideal, but, Emma, I don't want this to end just because my assignment is changing. Today has been the best evening I've had in years." "Mine too," Emma agreed. "I was thinking, maybe we could try the long-distance thing for a while. See how it goes." "I was hoping you'd say that." They exchanged full contact information, made plans for the following weekend, and talked about the logistics of maintaining a relationship across the distance between London and Windsor. James explained that his new position would actually give him more regular time off, and Emma mentioned that she had always wanted to explore Windsor Castle from a historical perspective. As they prepared to leave the coffee shop, James hesitated for a moment, then spoke with the same quiet confidence he had shown that morning. "Emma, I need you to know something. This past year, your wave wasn't just a nice gesture to you. There were difficult mornings, long shifts, times when the job felt more like a burden than an honor. But every morning at 7:15, you reminded me that what I do matters to someone. You made me feel seen and appreciated, even when we couldn't speak. That meant more to me than you could possibly know." Emma felt tears prick at her eyes. "James, you gave me something too. In a city where everyone rushes past each other without making eye contact, you were a constant. Someone who was always there, reliable and steady. You made London feel like home." Outside the coffee shop, They stood together on the sidewalk, both reluctant to end an evening that had exceeded both of their expectations. The summer sun was setting, casting everything in golden light that made the moment feel almost magical. "So what happens to our morning routine now?" Emma asked with a smile. "I suppose I could wave to the new guard, but it wouldn't be the same." James laughed. "Actually, I have an idea about that. What if, instead of waving to a guard you can't talk to, you started having breakfast with a guard you can talk to? I know a place near Windsor that serves excellent coffee and has the most beautiful view of the Thames." "That sounds perfect," Emma said. "Though I have to warn you, I'm quite particular about my morning coffee routine. I wouldn't expect anything less from someone who maintained a year-long waving schedule regardless of weather conditions." They hugged goodbye, a warm, comfortable embrace that felt both natural and promising. As they separated, Emma realized that her simple morning wave had led to something she never could have anticipated. Over the following months, their weekend visits became the highlight of both their weeks. Emma discovered that Windsor Castle was even more fascinating from the inside, especially with James as her personal guide to the historical and security aspects she couldn't access as a regular tourist. James found that Emma's expertise in medieval history added depth to his understanding of the traditions he was protecting. Their relationship grew steadily, built on the foundation of mutual respect and genuine friendship they had developed through their morning ritual. They learned each other's languages of love, James's thoughtful planning, and Emma's spontaneous adventures. They supported each other's careers and celebrated each other's successes. A year after their first coffee date, James received an unexpected opportunity. The position of historical liaison for the Crown Estate had opened up, a role that would combine his military experience with his passion for preservation. The job was based in London. On the morning James interviewed for the position, Emma stood outside Buckingham Palace at 7:15 and waved to the guard on duty. But this time, her wave carried different meaning. It was a gesture of gratitude for the place where her love story had begun. James got the job. 2 years after their first meeting, James proposed to Emma in the coffee shop where they had their first date. The ring was a vintage piece he had found at an antique shop near Windsor, chosen because Emma had once mentioned her love for things with history and stories. They married the following spring in a small ceremony attended by family, friends, and Major Harrison, who had been the one to bring them together. Emma's colleagues from the British Museum mixed with James's fellow guards, creating a celebration that bridged their two worlds. On their wedding morning, they took a walk past Buckingham Palace together. Standing at the gates where everything had started, Emma waved one final time to the guard on duty. This time, James waved too. Their story became something of a legend among the Queen's Guard, a reminder that sometimes the most meaningful connections come from the smallest gestures. Emma's simple wave had grown into a love story that proved the power of recognizing the humanity in everyone we encounter. Years later, when people asked how they met, Emma and James would smile and say they were introduced by a wave. It was the simplest possible beginning to what became a beautifully complex love story, built on patience, kindness, and the belief that every person deserves to be seen and acknowledged. Their morning routine had evolved from a silent wave to shared breakfast conversations, but the heart of it remained the same. Two people choosing to see the best in each other, day after day, building something beautiful from the foundation of simple human connection. The morning that changed everything started like any other, but fate had different plans for Emma Martinez and guard James Wellington. Emma was running slightly late after stopping to help an elderly man who had dropped his groceries near the train station. Her kind gesture meant she arrived at the palace gates at 7:20 instead of her usual 7:15. James had noticed her delay and felt the familiar worry creeping in. Had she finally found a different route to work? Had their year-long morning ritual come to an end? When he spotted her familiar figure approaching 5 minutes later than usual, the relief was so strong he almost forgot his training. As Emma approached the gates, something unusual was happening. A small crowd had gathered, and there seemed to be some kind of commotion near the guard posts. She could see photographers and what looked like official palace personnel moving around with clipboards and serious expressions. What Emma didn't know was that this was the day of the annual Queen's Guard inspection and rotation ceremony. Every summer, The guards participated in a special review where exceptional service members were recognized, and new assignments were announced. James had been selected for a special commendation for his 3 years of exemplary service. But, more importantly, he was being transferred to Windsor Castle starting the following week. As Emma approached her usual spot, she realized she couldn't get close enough for her customary wave. The crowd of officials, photographers, and early-morning tourists had formed a barrier between her and the gates. She stood on her tiptoes, trying to spot her guard among the ceremony preparations, but the crowd was too thick. James could see Emma struggling to get closer, and, for the first time in his military career, he found himself more focused on a civilian than on the ceremony he was supposed to be participating in. His commanding officer, Major Harrison, was approaching with a photographer to document his commendation, but James kept glancing toward the crowd where he had glimpsed Emma's familiar face. "Guard Wellington," Major Harrison called out. "You seem distracted this morning. Is everything all right?" James straightened immediately. "Yes, sir. Just observing the crowd for any security concerns, sir." Major Harrison followed James's gaze and noticed him looking toward a young woman with dark curls who was standing on her tiptoes, obviously trying to see over the people in front of her. The major had been in the military long enough to recognize that particular look on a young soldier's face. "Expecting someone in the crowd, Wellington?" the major asked, his tone more curious than accusatory. James hesitated. Military protocol discouraged personal connections that might affect duty performance, but Major Harrison had always been fair and understanding with his men. "There's a young lady who walks past every morning on her way to work, sir. She always waves. It's become something of a routine." The major raised an eyebrow. "Every morning, for how long?" "Nearly a year, sir." Major Harrison looked again at the young woman, who was now checking her watch and obviously torn between staying to continue looking for someone and needing to get to work. The major had been married for 25 years and recognized the signs of two people who had developed feelings for each other, even from a distance. "Well, Wellington, today is your last day on morning duty at Buckingham Palace before your transfer to Windsor. Seems like it might be important to make sure your routine doesn't end on a disappointing note." Before James could ask what the major meant, Major Harrison was walking toward the crowd with purposeful strides. James watched in amazement as his commanding officer approached Emma directly. Emma was just about to give up and head to work when a distinguished man in military dress uniform approached her. "Excuse me, miss," Major Harrison said politely, "but would you happen to be the young lady who waves to one of our guards each morning?" Emma's eyes widened in surprise. "Ah, yes, I am. Is that not allowed? I didn't mean to cause any problems." The major smiled warmly. "On the contrary, miss. You've caused no problems at all. In fact, you've made quite a positive impression. Would you mind terribly if I asked you to wait here for just a moment?" Emma nodded, completely confused but curious about what was happening. She watched as the major returned to the guards and spoke quietly to her guard, the one she had been waving to for nearly a year. She could see the surprise on his partially visible face, even from a distance. "Wellington," Major Harrison said quietly, "I'm going to do something completely irregular, but 25 years of military service has taught me that sometimes the irregular thing is the right thing. You have 15 minutes before the ceremony begins. I'm giving you permission to speak with that young lady." James felt his heart stop. "Sir, you heard me, guard. 15 minutes. Out of uniform regulations, but entirely within my authority as your commanding officer. Don't make me regret this decision." James's mind raced. For a year, he had imagined what he might say to the woman who had brightened his mornings with her simple wave. Now he had 15 minutes to find out who she was, and to tell her that after today, she wouldn't see him at the palace gates anymore. With legs that felt suddenly unsteady, James walked toward Emma. As he approached, she noticed he was taller than she had realized, and his eyes were a warm brown that seemed both nervous and kind. "Hello," he said simply, stopping a respectful distance away. "I'm James Wellington. I believe you've been waving to me for the past year." Emma felt her cheeks warm with a combination of embarrassment and delight. "I'm Emma Martinez. I hope I haven't been bothering you. I know you can't wave back, but it seemed like the friendly thing to do." "Bothering me?" James laughed, a sound that was warmer and more genuine than Emma had expected. "Miss Martinez, Your wave has been the best part of my day for 11 months. I've actually been worried about what would happen when. When what? Emma prompted. James took a breath. I'm being transferred to Windsor Castle starting next week. This is my last morning at Buckingham Palace. I was afraid our routine would end without me ever getting to tell you how much it has meant to me. Emma felt a pang of disappointment that surprised her with its intensity. Oh, I had no idea. Congratulations on your transfer, though. That sounds like a good thing for your career. It is, James agreed. But I have to admit, I'm going to miss seeing your smile every morning. You probably don't realize this, but you've made standing guard duty something I actually looked forward to. They stood there for a moment, both aware that time was limited and neither quite sure how to proceed. Finally, Emma spoke up. This might be forward of me, but would you? I mean, when you're off duty, would you maybe like to get coffee sometime? I know a place that makes excellent lattes, and I could tell you why I started waving in the first place. James's face lit up with genuine happiness. I would like that very much. I'm off duty this evening, actually. The ceremony today marks the end of my rotation. They quickly exchanged phone numbers, with Emma programming his contact information while glancing nervously at the other guards and officials nearby. She had never imagined that her simple morning wave would lead to having coffee with the kind, handsome man who had been a bright spot in her daily routine. I should let you get back to your ceremony, Emma said, backing away reluctantly. And I'm already 20 minutes late for work. Emma, James called softly, using her name for the first time. She turned back to look at him. Thank you. For every wave, every smile, every morning. You made me remember that being a guard doesn't mean being invisible. Emma smiled, the same warm smile she had been giving him for months. But this time it was just for him. Thank you for noticing. I'll see you tonight. You absolutely will. As Emma hurried toward work, she felt lighter than she had in months. Her simple act of friendliness had grown into something she never expected. Behind her, James returned to the ceremony preparations with a spring in his step that his fellow guards had never seen before. Major Harrison watched the entire exchange with satisfaction. Sometimes, he reflected, the best military decisions had nothing to do with strategy or protocol, and everything to do with recognizing when two good people had found something worth fighting for. The ceremony proceeded beautifully, with James receiving his commendation with honor and pride. But throughout the official proceedings, both he and Emma found themselves thinking about the evening ahead, and the wonderful possibility that their year of morning waves had been just the beginning of something much more significant. That evening would mark the start of a new chapter for both of them, built on the foundation of respect, kindness, and the patient development of what would prove to be a truly beautiful friendship. Emma Martinez had always been an early riser, but moving to London for her new job at the British Museum had turned her morning routine into something extraordinary. Every weekday at exactly 7:15, she would walk past the gates of Buckingham Palace on her way to work, clutching her coffee and watching the world wake up around one of the most famous buildings on Earth. The first time she noticed the guard, it was purely by accident. She had stumbled slightly on the uneven pavement, spilling a few drops of her latte, and looked up to find herself making eye contact with one of the red-uniformed sentries standing at attention. Without thinking, she raised her free hand in a small wave. The guard, bound by protocol and duty, couldn't respond, but Emma could have sworn she saw the tiniest twitch at the corner of his mouth. That small moment should have been forgotten immediately, but something about it stuck with Emma throughout her entire first day cataloging medieval manuscripts. Maybe it was the loneliness of being new in a massive city, or perhaps it was the way the morning light had caught the gold buttons on his uniform. But she found herself thinking about that brief connection. The next morning, she deliberately took the same route. Sure enough, there he was, tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair visible beneath his bearskin hat. This time, her wave was intentional. A small, friendly gesture that said, "Good morning," without words. Again, he couldn't respond, but Emma noticed his posture seemed a little less rigid. Within a week, the wave had become as much a part of Emma's morning routine as her coffee. She would approach the palace gates, spot her guard. She had started thinking of him as her guard, though she knew that was silly, and offer her cheerful wave. Rain or shine, whether she was running late or had extra time, the wave happened. Her co-workers at the museum found it amusing when she mentioned it during lunch one day. "You're waving at a guard who can't wave back?" asked Sarah, her desk partner in the manuscripts department. "That's very optimistic of you." But Emma didn't see it as optimistic. She saw it as human. In a city of millions where people walked past each other every day without acknowledgement, where everyone stared at their phones instead of making eye contact, her small wave felt like an act of recognition. It said, "I see you. You matter." What Emma didn't know was that guard James Wellington had begun to look forward to her morning appearance with an anticipation that surprised him. In his 3 years of service with the Queen's Guard, he had become accustomed to tourists taking photos, children staring in wonder, and adults treating him more like a statue than a person. But this young woman with the dark curls and warm smile had somehow turned his morning duty into something he actually enjoyed. James couldn't break protocol by responding to her wave, but he had developed his own subtle way of acknowledging her presence. When she appeared at 7:15, he would shift his weight almost imperceptibly from his left foot to his right. It was a tiny movement that no one else would notice, but it was his secret way of saying good morning back. The routine continued through autumn and into winter. Emma bundled up in scarves and coats, her breath visible in the cold air, but the wave never stopped. Even on the morning she was running 20 minutes late because of a delayed train, she still took the extra few minutes to walk past the palace instead of taking the shorter route to work. James began to worry on the rare mornings when she didn't appear. Was she sick? Had she found a different route to work? On the day she missed because of a dental appointment, he found himself distracted throughout his entire shift, wondering if their small daily connection had come to an end. Christmas came and went, and Emma's wave became more animated. She had started adding a small smile and sometimes a little finger wiggle that made James fight to keep his expression neutral. She had no way of knowing that behind his stoic exterior, he was often struggling not to smile back. The other guards had begun to notice James's subtle morning ritual, though they said nothing. Military discipline meant they all understood the importance of maintaining their composure, but they also recognized that James seemed more alert and positive during morning duties. Whatever was happening, it was having a good effect on their colleague. Spring brought longer days and warmer weather. Emma traded her heavy coats for lighter jackets, and her morning walk became even more pleasant. She had been promoted to senior cataloger at the museum, and the extra confidence showed in her stride. Her wave had evolved too, becoming a more confident gesture that somehow conveyed her growing happiness with her life in London. One particularly beautiful May morning, Emma noticed something different. There was a new guard at the post, younger, with red hair visible beneath his bearskin. Her heart sank with unexpected disappointment. Where was her guard? Had he been transferred? Was he sick? For the first time in 8 months, Emma's wave was hesitant and awkward. The new guard, following protocol, remained motionless and expressionless. The magic of the moment was gone, leaving Emma feeling strangely bereft as she continued to work. But the next morning, her guard was back. Emma's relief was so visible that James, despite all his training, almost broke character. He had only been on a different shift rotation for one day, but seeing her disappointed expression through the reports of his fellow guards had affected him more than he wanted to admit. That evening, James did something he had never done before. He looked up the rules and regulations regarding off-duty contact with civilians. What he found was both encouraging and complicated. While on duty, guards were forbidden from any personal interactions. Off-duty, however, they were ordinary citizens free to live their lives as they chose. The problem was figuring out how to transition from their current silent morning ritual to any kind of real conversation. James couldn't simply start talking to her while on duty, and he had no way of knowing her name, where she worked, or anything about her beyond her punctual morning appearances and friendly waves. As summer approached, marking nearly a year of their daily exchanges, both Emma and James found themselves thinking more and more about each other. Emma had started choosing her morning outfits with slightly more care, telling herself it was because she was feeling more confident at work. James had begun requesting the morning shifts more frequently, though he told his supervisors it was because he preferred the earlier schedule. Their friends and family would have been amazed to know how much thought both of them put into those 15 seconds of connection each morning. Emma had developed elaborate theories about her guard's personality based on tiny observations. The way he stood straighter on sunny days, how his breathing seemed more relaxed when it was raining, the almost invisible way his eyes seemed to track her movement as she passed. James, meanwhile, had become an expert at reading Emma's moods from her walk and wave. He could tell when she had slept well, when she was stressed about something at work, and when she was particularly happy. On the morning she practically bounced past the gates after receiving news of a promotion, James felt genuinely proud of this stranger who had somehow become an important part of his day. Neither of them could have predicted that their simple daily ritual was about to change in ways that would surprise them both. The wheels were already in motion for a series of events that would transform their silent morning connection into something neither of them had dared to hope for. The morning that would change everything was still weeks away, but the foundation had been laid through months of small gestures, mutual respect, and the kind of patient friendship that can develop between two people who see the best in each other, even from a distance. As Emma walked past the palace gates that sunny June morning, offering her customary wave to the guard who had become such an unexpected bright spot in her daily routine, she had no idea that he was thinking the exact same thing about her. Both of them were about to discover that sometimes the most beautiful surprises come from the most unexpected places, and that a simple wave can be the beginning of something wonderful.